A mother's trust, a child's innocence, and a mistake that almost cost everything. One moment, Cindy was stirring soup. The next, a shattered jar, a deadly gas leak, and a race against time. But was it truly an accident, or is there something much darker at play? Keep watching. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden beams through the windows of the small village where Cindy lived with her parents. It was a serene place, filled with laughter and love, but beneath its calm exterior lay an undercurrent of neglect, a subtle oversight born out of trust and familiarity. Cindy's mother, Jane, had always believed that her daughter was mature beyond her years. After all, Cindy could recite multiplication tables, help fold laundry, and even assist in preparing meals. She seemed so capable, so eager to learn. That afternoon, as Jane balanced the weight of household chores on her shoulders, she glanced at Cindy stirring soup on the stove. "You're doing great," she said warmly, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'll just step outside for a moment to hang the laundry." Her voice carried a hint of pride, though it masked a deeper weariness. Life had been tough lately, money was tight, and every task felt like a mountain to climb. For once, letting Cindy handle the cooking seemed like a harmless way to lighten her load. Cindy beamed at her mother's praise, her dark curls bouncing as she nodded enthusiastically. "Don't worry, Mama, I'll take care of everything." Her confidence was endearing, almost infectious, but it masked a child's innocence, a lack of understanding about the dangers lurking within their cozy kitchen. As Jane stepped outside, the world seemed to pause. The wind rustled the leaves, birds chirped melodiously, and the scent of fresh air filled her lungs. Yet, deep down, a faint unease tugged at her heart. She shook it off, attributing it to fatigue. How could anything go wrong? After all, Cindy was careful, wasn't she? Inside, Cindy stood precariously on a wooden stool, her little arms stretched high to reach a spice jar perched atop the highest shelf. The room hummed softly with the sound of the gas cylinder hissing faintly beneath the pot. Unbeknownst to both mother and daughter, this seemingly ordinary act would set into motion a chain of events neither could have foreseen. Cindy's fingers brushed against the cool glass of the spice jar. With one final tug, it came loose, but not without consequence. The jar slipped from her grasp, shattering violently on the tiled floor below. Glass shards scattered across the room, glinting dangerously in the sunlight streaming through the window. Startled, Cindy stumbled backward, losing her balance on the wobbly stool. Her elbow knocked the pot's handle, sending boiling soup cascading onto the stovetop. For a brief second, time froze. The sizzle of hot liquid meeting metal filled the air, followed by a sudden silence. The flame beneath the pot flickered and died, leaving behind an ominous hiss, the steady release of gas seeping unnoticed into the confined space. Cindy stared wide-eyed at the mess before her, her mind racing with panic. What should she do? Call for her mother? But what if Mama thought she couldn't handle it? Her chest tightened as confusion gave way to fear. The air began to feel heavier, thicker, making each breath more labored than the last. Her vision blurred slightly, and her head spun. Desperate to fix things, she reached toward the knob to reignite the flame, unaware of the invisible danger surrounding her. Meanwhile, outside, Jane paused mid-step. A strange chill ran down her spine, prompting her to glance back toward the house. Something didn't feel right. Was that a smell? No, surely not. Still, her maternal instincts screamed louder than reason. Dropping the basket of laundry, she sprinted toward the door, dread pooling in her stomach. Jane burst into the kitchen, her heart pounding like a drum. The acrid tang of gas hit her first, sharp and overwhelming. Her eyes watered instantly, forcing her to shield her face with her arm. "Cindy," she cried, her voice cracking with terror. There was no response, only the eerie hiss of the leaking cylinder. Her gaze darted around the dimly lit room until it landed on Cindy, slumped lifelessly on the cold tiles, her tiny frame trembling faintly. Time seemed to stretch infinitely as Jane rushed forward, scooping her daughter into her arms. Cindy's skin was clammy, her breathing shallow and uneven. Tears streamed down Jane's cheeks as she cradled her child close, whispering desperate pleas for her to wake up. With adrenaline coursing through her veins, Jane staggered toward the door, clutching Cindy tightly. Every step felt like a battle against gravity, Yet she pushed forward, driven by primal instinct. As they crossed the threshold, a deafening roar echoed behind them. The spark from the broken jar's metal lid ignited the accumulated gas, turning the kitchen into a fiery inferno. Flames erupted violently, consuming everything in their path. Outside, Jane collapsed onto the grass, her body shaking uncontrollably. Cindy stirred weakly in her arms, her eyelids fluttering open. Relief washed over Jane momentarily, but it was quickly replaced by guilt and horror. What had she done? How could she have let this happen? News of the explosion spread quickly through the village. Neighbors gathered outside the smoldering remains of the kitchen, murmuring in hushed tones. Some offered words of comfort, while others cast judgmental glances at Jane, whose face remained pale and hollow. She barely noticed them, her focus fixed solely on Cindy, who now lay in a hospital bed several miles away. The doctors assured her that Cindy would recover physically, but the psychological scars might linger far longer. Each night, Jane replayed the scene in her mind, the shattered jar, the hissing gas, the flames licking hungrily at the walls. Over and over, she questioned herself. Why hadn't she stayed? Why had she trusted so blindly? Her husband, Daniel, arrived later that evening, his face etched with anguish. He held her close, his own tears soaking her shoulder. Together, they vowed never to make such a mistake again. But vows were easy to make, living with the consequences proved far harder. The days that followed the explosion were a blur of hospital visits, police reports, and endless sleepless nights. Jane found herself trapped in a cycle of guilt and self-recrimination, her once bright spirit dimmed by the weight of her choices. She sat beside Cindy's hospital bed, clutching her daughter's frail hand as if afraid to let go. Each heartbeat from the monitor was a reminder of how close she had come to losing everything. Daniel, too, struggled with his own demons. While he loved Jane deeply, he couldn't help but feel anger at himself for not being there, anger at their circumstances, and anger at the world for allowing such tragedy to occur. Yet, whenever he looked at Cindy's peaceful face, his resolve hardened. They would survive this. They had to. As Cindy began to regain strength, small details about the incident emerged. She recounted the moment the jar slipped, the sound of the gas hissing, and the dizziness that overtook her. Her voice was soft, tinged with fear, but also resilience. "I didn't know what to do, Mama," she whispered one evening. "But I tried." Jane's heart broke anew. "You did everything right, sweetheart," she replied, forcing a smile despite the storm raging inside her. "And now we're going to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." Returning home after Cindy's discharge was bittersweet. The charred remnants of the kitchen served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life. Temporary walls had been erected to seal off the damaged area, but the emotional scars ran deeper. Meals were prepared on a portable electric stove in the living room, a temporary solution until they could afford repairs. Cindy adjusted quickly to the changes, her natural curiosity undiminished. However, her parents noticed subtle shifts in her behavior. She flinched whenever someone moved suddenly near the stove or when they mentioned cooking. One afternoon, while helping Daniel prepare dinner, she hesitated before turning on the burner. "Daddy, is it safe?" she asked, her voice trembling. Daniel knelt beside her, meeting her gaze with unwavering sincerity. "It's completely safe, Cindy. We've made sure of it." He explained the safety measures they had implemented: new appliances, carbon monoxide detectors, and emergency shut-off valves. Still, the question lingered in the air, unspoken yet heavy. Would Cindy ever fully trust the kitchen again? A week later, an unexpected visitor arrived at their doorstep. Detective Marlowe, a seasoned investigator assigned to the case, requested a private meeting with Jane and Daniel. His demeanor was calm, almost comforting, but his questions cut straight to the core. "Did either of you notice any irregularities with the gas cylinder prior to the incident?" he asked, jotting notes in a leather-bound notebook. Jane shook her head, her throat tight. "No, nothing out of the ordinary. It was checked regularly by the supplier." Marlowe nodded thoughtfully. "I see. And Cindy, did she mention anything unusual leading up to the accident?" Daniel exchanged a glance with Jane. "She said the gas smelled stronger than usual, but we assumed it was just our imagination." The detective paused, his expression unreadable. That's interesting. I'll need to review the inspection reports further. In the meantime, please ensure all safety protocols are strictly followed. After he left, Jane felt a strange sense of unease. Something about Marlowe's visit felt off. Was there more to the explosion than met the eye? Over the next few weeks, Jane became increasingly preoccupied with Marlowe's cryptic comments. She combed through old receipts and invoices, searching for any anomalies related to the gas supply. Late one night, as Daniel slept soundly beside her, she discovered something alarming: a discrepancy in the delivery dates. According to the records, the gas cylinder used during the explosion hadn't been inspected in nearly 2 years. Her hands trembled as she dialed Marlowe's number. When he answered, his tone was brisk. "What is it, Mrs. Harper?" "I think there's something wrong with the gas supplier," she blurted. "The cylinder wasn't inspected properly." There was a long pause before Marlowe responded. "I suspected as much. Let me look into it further." Hanging up, Jane felt a mixture of relief and dread. If the cylinder was faulty, who else might have been affected? And why hadn't anyone raised concerns sooner? Days turned into weeks as Marlowe delved deeper into the investigation. Meanwhile, life resumed its rhythm for the Harper family. Cindy started attending school again, though she remained quieter than usual. Her teachers noted her improved academic performance but expressed concern about her social withdrawal. One afternoon, while playing in the backyard, Cindy stumbled upon a rusted key buried beneath the soil. Intrigued, she showed it to her father. Daniel examined it closely, recognizing it as a skeleton key. "Where did you find this?" he asked sharply. "In the garden, near the fence," Cindy replied innocently. Daniel's mind raced. That section of the yard bordered the property of Mr. Alden, the reclusive neighbor whose past was shrouded in mystery. Could the key hold answers to the explosion, or perhaps darker secrets tied to their community? Encouraged by Daniel's curiosity, the Harpers decided to explore the origins of the key. With Marlowe's blessing, they visited Mr. Alden, whose weathered face betrayed little emotion. At first, he denied knowing anything about the key, but under pressure, he admitted it belonged to him. "It's an old thing," he muttered, avoiding their gaze. "Used to belong to my late brother. Don't know why it ended up in your yard." Unsatisfied with his explanation, Daniel pressed further. "Do you know anything about the gas company? Any issues with deliveries or inspections?" Mr. Alden stiffened visibly. "Why are you asking me this? I haven't dealt with them in years." But his reaction spoke volumes. Determined to uncover the truth, the Harpers vowed to dig deeper, unaware of the web of deceit that awaited them. The days following Christmas passed in a haze of joy and contentment. The family embraced the holiday spirit, reveling in their newfound closeness. But beneath the surface, an unsettling calm settled over the house, a calm that felt almost too perfect, as though nature itself was holding its breath. One evening, while Daniel worked late at the garage he owned on the outskirts of town, Jane decided to teach Cindy how to bake cookies using the electric stove. It was a small step, but one they both hoped would ease her lingering fear of the kitchen. As they measured flour and sugar, laughter filled the room, a stark contrast to the tension that had once gripped it. But outside, the wind began to pick up, rattling the windows with an ominous rhythm. Neither woman noticed as they focused on their task. When the timer beeped, signaling the cookies were ready, Jane opened the oven door, releasing a puff of warm, sugary air. Satisfied with their creation, she turned off the stove and began cleaning up. It wasn't until later, when Cindy wandered into the living room to play with her toys, that Jane realized something was off. A faint hissing sound emanated from the corner of the kitchen, near the old gas line where the new electric stove had been installed. Her heart skipped a beat as she froze mid-motion, her mind racing back to that fateful day months ago. She rushed to investigate, her hands trembling as she knelt beside the wall. There, hidden behind a loose panel, was a tiny crack in the pipe, a remnant of the explosion that no one had thought to check thoroughly. Gas seeped slowly into the room, invisible yet deadly. Panic surged through her veins, but this time, Jane acted swiftly. She grabbed Cindy and ushered her out of the house, shouting for Daniel even though she knew he wouldn't hear her from so far away. Clutching her daughter tightly, she dialed emergency services, her voice shaking but determined. As sirens wailed in the distance, Jane stared at the darkened house, her mind replaying every decision that had led them here. Was this fate's way of testing them again? Or was it simply a cruel reminder that danger could never truly be erased? The firefighters arrived within minutes, their boots crunching against the frost-covered ground as they assessed the situation. They confirmed Jane's worst fears: the gas leak was real, though minor enough to avoid another catastrophic explosion. Still, the close call left everyone shaken. Daniel returned home shortly after, his face pale as he listened to the details. He pulled Jane into a tight embrace, whispering apologies for not being there sooner. "I should have stayed," he murmured, his voice breaking. "No one could have predicted this," Jane replied, her tone firm despite her own turmoil. "We've done everything we can to keep our family safe. Sometimes, accidents happen because life is unpredictable." That night, as the three sat together by candlelight, the power had been cut off temporarily, Cindy asked a question that silenced them all. "Why does bad stuff keep happening to us?" Her voice was soft, vulnerable, carrying the weight of a child burdened beyond her years. Jane hesitated, searching for the right words. Finally, she said, "Because sometimes, life wants to teach us important lessons. And maybe, just maybe, we're meant to learn how strong we really are." Cindy nodded slowly, though whether she fully understood remained unclear. For now, it was enough to know that her parents were still fighting for her and for each other. In the days that followed, the family delved deeper into uncovering the source of the gas leak. An inspection revealed that the original repair work done after the explosion hadn't been thorough enough. Someone, perhaps the contractor hired hastily during the rebuilding process, had overlooked critical safety measures. Frustration bubbled within Jane and Daniel as they confronted the contractor, demanding answers. At first, he denied responsibility, citing budget constraints and lack of proper oversight. But under pressure from local authorities, he admitted to cutting corners to save time and money. This revelation ignited a firestorm of anger and betrayal within the community. Other families who had used the same contractor began reporting similar issues, leading to a broader investigation. Meanwhile, Jane channeled her outrage into action, advocating for stricter regulations and accountability in home repairs. Through this ordeal, Cindy watched her parents transform not just as individuals, but as leaders within their community. Their resilience inspired others, proving that strength often emerges from the ashes of adversity. Despite their progress, cracks still showed in the family's foundation. Daniel's workload increased dramatically as news of the scandal spread, forcing him to spend even more time away from home. Jane, caught between her advocacy efforts and caring for Cindy, struggled to maintain balance. Cindy, sensing the strain, retreated further into herself. Though she participated in therapy sessions and art projects, her smiles grew fewer, her laughter quieter. One night, while lying in bed, she whispered to her mother, "Do you think we'll ever stop feeling scared?" Jane paused, her throat tightening. After a moment, she replied honestly, "Probably not. But fear doesn't have to control us. We can use it to stay vigilant, to protect ourselves and others. That's what makes us stronger." Cindy mulled over these words, finding comfort in their truth. Yet deep down, she wondered if true peace was possible or if the specter of danger would forever haunt their lives. Spring arrived, bringing with it the promise of renewal. The village buzzed with activity as people prepared for the annual festival, a celebration of unity and resilience. Jane organized a booth dedicated to safety awareness, displaying informational posters and hosting workshops for families. Cindy helped decorate the booth, drawing pictures of phoenixes rising from flames. Her artwork captured the attention of many visitors, sparking conversations about hope and perseverance. For the first time in months, she felt proud not just of her creations, but of the role she played in helping others. Yet, as the festival drew to a close, a shadow loomed on the horizon. Late that evening, Jane received a phone call from a concerned neighbor. A similar gas leak had been discovered in another part of town, prompting widespread panic. Though the situation was contained quickly, it served as a chilling reminder that danger was never far away. Standing beside Daniel and Cindy, Jane gazed at the stars above, her thoughts heavy with resolve. Life might continue to test them, but they would face each challenge together, armed with love, courage, and the knowledge that they were capable of surviving anything. And so, the story continued, weaving threads of triumph and tragedy into the tapestry of their lives. What lay ahead remained uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would meet it head-on, unyielding and undeterred. As the weeks turned into months, the family found themselves caught in a whirlwind of revelations and challenges. The gas leak scandal had spiraled into something far greater than they initially anticipated. Investigations uncovered not just negligence but corruption, evidence that the contractor involved had falsified safety certificates to secure lucrative deals across multiple towns. Jane became increasingly consumed by her mission to expose the truth. She spent countless hours poring over documents, speaking with whistleblowers, and gathering evidence. Her relentless pursuit of justice inspired many, yet it also drew criticism from those who felt she was overstepping boundaries. Some accused her of exploiting personal tragedy for public gain, while others praised her courage. Meanwhile, Daniel faced mounting pressure at work. Clients began canceling contracts after hearing rumors about the scandal, fearing association with someone linked to such controversy. His stress manifested physically. He lost weight, developed dark circles under his eyes, and grew short-tempered. Yet, despite everything, he stood firmly beside Jane, believing wholeheartedly in her cause. Cindy, however, struggled silently. While she admired her parents' strength, their constant battles left little room for normalcy. School became a refuge where she could escape the chaos at home, though even there, whispers followed her. Classmates whispered about her family's tragic past, some out of curiosity, others out of malice. One day, during recess, Cindy overheard a group of older kids mocking her. Her house almost blew up because her mom didn't care enough to stay home, one of them sneered. Tears welled up in Cindy's eyes as she fled to the playground corner, curling up alone beneath the slide. It wasn't until later that evening, when Jane noticed her daughter's unusually quiet demeanor, that the truth came out. Holding Cindy close, Jane vowed to protect her not just from external dangers but from the cruel words of others. The investigation into the contractor deepened, revealing connections to powerful figures within the local government. These individuals, threatened by the exposure of their involvement, retaliated fiercely. Anonymous threats began arriving at the family's doorstep, letters warning them to back off or face consequences worse than any accident. Daniel dismissed the warnings as empty posturing, but Jane couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Late one night, as she sorted through files in the dining room, she heard a faint noise outside. Peering through the curtains, she saw shadows moving along the edge of their property. Heart pounding, she grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the porch, only to find nothing but an overturned trash can and scattered debris. Or so she thought. Later that week, a suspicious fire broke out near the garage where Daniel worked. Though extinguished quickly, the incident sent shockwaves through the community. Was this merely a coincidence, or was someone deliberately targeting them? The family hired security measures, a surveillance system, reinforced locks, and even a guard dog, but the tension remained palpable. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside, seemed amplified in their minds. Under the strain of constant vigilance, cracks began to show in the family's unity. Arguments erupted over trivial matters, each side projecting their fears onto the other. Daniel accused Jane of obsessing over the investigation at the expense of their well-being. Jane countered that his refusal to confront the issue head-on only made things worse. Cindy, caught in the crossfire, retreated further into herself. She stopped participating in therapy sessions, claiming they no longer helped. Instead, she poured her emotions into her art, creating increasingly dark and unsettling pieces. One painting, in particular, haunted Jane, a depiction of a burning house with shadowy figures looming in the background. Desperate to mend their fractured relationships, the family decided to take a weekend getaway to a secluded cabin in the woods. The change of scenery offered temporary relief, allowing them to reconnect without the distractions of daily life. They laughed together, explored nature, and shared stories late into the night. But as dawn broke on their final morning, a chilling discovery shattered their peace. Someone had broken into the cabin during the night, leaving behind a single message scrawled on the wall in red paint: "Stop digging, or you'll burn again." Back home, the family fortified their defenses, installing additional cameras and hiring private security. Yet, the psychological toll of living under constant threat proved unbearable. Sleepless nights became routine, punctuated by false alarms and paranoid suspicions. Jane reached out to allies within the community, rallying support for her crusade. Together, they organized a town hall meeting to address the growing concerns about safety regulations and corporate accountability. Hundreds attended, voicing their fears and demanding action. For the first time, the family saw tangible progress. Local officials pledged to launch an independent inquiry into the corruption allegations, promising transparency and swift resolution. Encouraged by this development, Jane pressed forward, determined to ensure that no family would ever suffer as hers had. Yet, amidst the optimism, a nagging doubt lingered. Who were these shadowy forces opposing them, and how far would they go to silence them? The answers came sooner than anyone expected. During a late-night raid conducted by authorities, evidence linking high-ranking officials to the contractor's illegal activities was uncovered. Arrest warrants were issued, sending shockwaves through the political landscape. But victory came at a cost. As news of the arrests spread, retaliation escalated. The family received another threat, this time accompanied by a video showing footage of Cindy walking home from school. Panic gripped Jane and Daniel as they realized the lengths their enemies would go to achieve silence. Determined to protect their daughter at all costs, they devised a plan. With the help of trusted friends and law enforcement, they arranged for Cindy to temporarily relocate to a safe house under an assumed identity. Though heart-wrenching, they knew it was necessary. As the days passed, the family awaited the outcome of the trial, their hearts heavy with uncertainty. Would justice prevail, or would the forces of corruption triumph once more? And what lay ahead for Cindy, whose innocence had been forever altered by events beyond her control? Only time would tell. The days stretched into weeks as the family adjusted to their new reality. Cindy's temporary relocation to a safe house was both a relief and a heartache for Jane and Daniel. While they knew it was the safest option, the separation gnawed at them relentlessly. Video calls became their lifeline, but even those brief moments together felt bittersweet, a reminder of what they had lost and what they were fighting to protect. Jane threw herself into her advocacy work with renewed vigor, channeling her pain into action. She collaborated closely with law enforcement and community leaders to ensure that the trial against the corrupt officials proceeded without interference. Public support swelled as more people came forward with their own stories of neglect and betrayal. Daniel, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to rebuild his business while maintaining contact with allies who could help shield the family from further threats. His once bustling garage now operated under strict security protocols, its employees trained to recognize potential dangers. Despite the strain, he found solace in knowing that his efforts contributed to keeping Cindy safe. Yet, beneath their determination lay an unspoken fear, the fear that their sacrifices might not be enough. Each night, Jane and Daniel sat together in silence, holding hands and drawing strength from one another. They spoke little, for words seemed inadequate to express the depth of their emotions. As the trial approached, whispers of conspiracy began to circulate. Some claimed that key evidence had gone missing, while others alleged that witnesses were being intimidated into silence. The family's lawyer assured them that these were mere tactics employed by desperate defendants, but the uncertainty cast a long shadow over their hopes. One evening, as Jane reviewed documents in her makeshift office, she stumbled upon something alarming: a discrepancy in the timeline of events surrounding the initial gas leak. Cross-referencing dates and testimonies, she realized that the contractor hadn't acted alone. There were others involved, individuals whose names hadn't surfaced during earlier investigations. Her discovery sent ripples through the legal team, prompting urgent discussions about expanding the scope of the case. However, this revelation also drew increased scrutiny from those seeking to bury the truth. Threats escalated, manifesting in subtle yet menacing ways: a dead bird on their doorstep, cryptic messages left on their voicemail, and anonymous phone calls at odd hours. Through it all, Jane remained resolute, though her resolve masked a growing exhaustion. She wondered if the fight for justice was worth the toll it took on her family. Was there a point where survival outweighed vengeance? Or was surrender simply unacceptable? Amidst the turmoil, a glimmer of hope emerged. A whistleblower, a former employee of the contractor, came forward with damning evidence. Documents detailing bribes, falsified safety reports, and covert partnerships with government officials painted a chilling picture of systemic corruption. The whistleblower's testimony strengthened the prosecution's case significantly, turning public opinion firmly against the accused. News outlets covered the story extensively, sparking outrage and calls for accountability. For the first time since the scandal broke, Jane felt a flicker of optimism. But the victory was short-lived. Just as the momentum built, tragedy struck. During a routine visit to the safe house, Cindy fell ill with a severe fever. Though doctors reassured Jane and Daniel that it was likely stress-related, the incident reminded them of how fragile their daughter's health and spirit had become. Desperate to restore some semblance of normalcy, Jane arranged for Cindy to attend virtual art therapy sessions with a renowned therapist known for working with trauma survivors. Through painting and guided conversations, Cindy slowly began to process her fears and anxieties. Her artwork shifted from dark, haunting images to vibrant depictions of nature and family life. For the first time in months, Jane saw a genuine smile return to Cindy's face. It wasn't the carefree grin of childhood, but it was progress, a sign that healing was possible, even in the face of adversity. The day of the trial arrived, marked by a palpable tension that hung heavy in the courtroom. Dozens of reporters lined the halls, capturing every detail for the world to see. Inside, the atmosphere was electric, witnesses nervously fidgeted, lawyers strategized behind closed doors, and the accused sat stoically, their expressions unreadable. Jane and Daniel sat side by side in the front row, clutching each other's hands tightly. They exchanged reassuring glances, drawing strength from their shared purpose. Behind them, supporters filled the gallery, their presence a testament to the community's solidarity. The proceedings unfolded methodically, with each witness contributing pieces to the puzzle. The whistleblower's testimony proved pivotal, corroborated by newly uncovered evidence. As the prosecutor laid out the case, the gravity of the situation became clear not just for the family, but for society as a whole. However, the defense fought back fiercely, employing delaying tactics and questioning the credibility of witnesses. At times, it seemed as though the scales of justice might tip in favor of the accused. Yet, Jane refused to waver. She believed in the power of truth, no matter how elusive it sometimes appeared. After days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. The courtroom fell silent as the judge read the decision aloud. Guilty. On all counts. Cheers erupted from the gallery, tears streaming down faces as the magnitude of the moment sank in. For Jane and Daniel, it was a vindication of sorts, a validation of their struggle and sacrifice. But more importantly, it was a promise to Cindy that justice existed, even when it seemed out of reach. In the aftermath, the family celebrated cautiously, aware that the battle wasn't entirely over. Appeals would follow, and vigilance would remain paramount. Yet, for the first time in years, they allowed themselves to dream of a future free from fear. Cindy, reunited with her parents, embraced them tightly, whispering, "We did it." Her voice carried a weight far beyond her years, but also a spark of hope that none of them had dared to fully believe in until now. And so, the chapter closed not on a note of finality, but of resilience. Life would continue to test them, but they were ready. Together, they stood stronger than ever, armed with love, courage, and the knowledge that even in the darkest storms, light could prevail.